Kayley, did you know that Star Health Insurance, one of India's largest health insurers, allegedly suffered a significant data security incident compromising the sensitive personal and insurance details of over 31 million people?
Wow, 31 million? I did not know that exact number, but I did hear that this story recently got a lot more interesting.
All right, so there's a lot of different parts of this. There's a hacker, and then there's this kind of cool insider twist.
Yeah.
And we read some articles on MSN.com and CISO online. But the basic story, I think, so there's a hacker allegedly named Zen, Z-E-N. So it's Xenzen. So claims to have accessed over 7 terabytes of data.
Mm-hmm.
And the original dump of the whole thing was being offered online for $150,000. And then there were smaller batches. I like that the smaller batches were about 100,000 and they were going for about 10K each.
Yeah, in case you want a deal,
Right. It's like, look, I'm not, my budget for my criminal enterprise isn't in the 6 figures right now. Not until we get done with the pre-Christmas pig butchering. So I'll go ahead and I'll just take the 100K right now, please.
Right. Yeah.
But it's tough. It's like, customer names, PAN numbers, mobile numbers, which are pretty valuable these days.
Yeah.
Email addresses, and then policy details. I don't know what you do with those. So, some of these things that are considered personal information now, I'm not quite sure what the bad guys do. But confidential medical records, which are embarrassing in a single instance, but not too much you do in the aggregate with those. But what's the twist here, Kayley? Because this one does get more interesting.
Yeah. So the alleged hacker Zen claimed that Star Health's actual CISO, Amarjit Kanuja, actually facilitated the breach. But here's the thing. He sold this data for $43,000, which
yeah. I mean, look, it's finding out the market value of things. I mean, again, all allegations though was always really interesting because 43, it was probably an Indian currency, not in the US. We're looking at translated numbers here, but the number of things for which people, again, allegedly are willing to sort of risk their career, it's a smaller number than you think.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely.
It's a smaller number when you think.
I can't imagine, again, all alleged, if this were true and Amarjit Kanuja did sell it for $43K, how is he feeling right now, seeing how much this is going for on the black market?
He's got the new Cadillac too that cost exactly that amount of money,
exactly,
or whatever it was, and he's like, someone says that you've got a lot of explaining to do.
Yeah,
but for what it's worth, right? Star Health Insurance has refuted the allegations of any internal involvement. They're calling it a targeted and malicious attack, and they've committed to retaining a forensic investigation. Now, there is a whistleblower who was reported in the news media. And the story, though, is that the hacker group used an encrypted app. I was not familiar with this. It's called TOX, T-O-X. I was not.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that either. It was a first for me.
And essentially, it was an exchange of API details and a credential pair, again, alleged, for cryptocurrency. So maybe if the alleged recipient of the crypto held it, I mean, I know crypto's gone up in the last couple of weeks here, so maybe it's worth more than that 43K.
Right, exactly. I feel like I would still feel a little bit slighted.
I do think so. So, if the last 2 years have been about account takeover fraud, ransomware fraud, there is, as we end the year here in 2024, and we look forward to 2025, a lot of the folks who I work with on the cyber side, on the cyber planning side, are predicting that insider threats are going to be the risk to prepare for in 2025. There's a lot of reporting from outside forensic vendors, from outside intel vendors that more and more, why steal something if you can just give a relatively low number to somebody within the company to potentially have an opportunity to be more persistent?
Yeah. And, survival is key to all of us. And so if you're facing significant economic hardship, or you're just very disgruntled with the way the company's going or is run or anything like that, it becomes an enticing offer.
Yeah, that's right. And so you're seeing with this story, again, all allegations, you're seeing two things that are going to be interesting. One is the alleged insider threat, right? Mm-hmm. A bad actor approaching someone with the keys to the kingdom and simply paying them for them, right? Yeah. And then the second thing, which is what led to the stories in the news media, were a whistleblower, right? So there's someone who is purporting to be an employee of the company who's going to the press, presumably not for money, and reporting on the fact that it was, again, allegedly an insider. So, for companies that are facing these sorts of issues, you're thinking, how do I plan and make my company bribe proof? And then also, I got to prepare that we're not always going to be fighting these battles behind a confidential wall. One of our employees who hears about this and maybe thinks we're not moving fast enough can always go to the press. So it's preparation for the insider threat and preparation to deal with private information through a whistleblower becoming subject to the public disclosure.
We talk about PR strategies that are necessary for breaches, and the breaches just keep getting bigger and bigger, and now you have these extra elements to consider as well. It's just kind of a mess.
All right, well, I'm your host, Jack Clabby. I'm a cybersecurity attorney at Carlton Fields, PA, here in Tampa, Florida. With me, as always, is Kayley Melton, a cybersecurity mercenary and the Bob Ross of InfoSec. Today, we'll chat with Dr. Sunny Ware, a web application penetration tester of one of the world's largest financial services companies. Known to her friends at Neon Temple as Dr. Sunny, she's also the author of 2 books, including the Burp Suite Cookbook. The Burp Suite Cookbook provides practical solutions for identifying, testing, and exploiting vulnerabilities in web apps and APIs. This is going to be a great episode, so stay tuned. We'll dive right in after a short break.
Welcome to No Password Required, a monthly conversation that introduces you to some of the top talent in the world of cybersecurity.
Welcome back. Our guest today is Dr. Sunny Ware. Dr. Sunny, welcome to the No Password Required podcast.
Thank you, Jack, and thank you, team.
I'd like to start with your current role, and then we'll back up and find a little bit more about your career path. But let's start out with, what can you tell us about what you do now in your role in application pen testing?
Sure. So I'm an IT security manager, and I oversee a group of penetration testers. Our specialty is web, API, and mobile penetration testing.
All right. So, like every good superhero, we know that every pen tester has an origin story. What can you share with us about you and how you got into the business?
Oh, well, thank you for the compliment. I don't consider myself a superhero, but I came from very humble beginnings. So I started as a developer, maintaining other people's code, which is a very humbling experience if you've never had to do it before. But it was good because sort of made me realize the things that I wouldn't want to copy. Okay. Bad habits, that is. I was maintaining C++ code, but that didn't last long. I was learning Java on the side, and I know that's a bad word for a lot of people, but I love Java. Hate me if you will. I love it. But you have to bear in mind the time frame that this was. So Java was very, very new. And my lead, he gave me the opportunity to do some brand new coding. So to basically start working on a new application and not have to maintain someone else's code. And I was very excited about that because to me, writing code is like making a painting on a blank canvas. And I was allowed to be as creative as I like. So to me, looking at code is like looking at art. So from there, I did that, and then I started doing designs pretty early in my career. So I started doing software designs. They would start out as modules, and then eventually were full application stacks. And eventually in my career, I was designing enterprise systems, so intercommunications and IPCs and things like that.
We're backing up even further. When did you first get exposure to coding? How did you learn C++ in the first place?
So I learned C. I learned C in school. Okay. I learned just C++ on my own because they were really writing it like C. Object-oriented in C++, you can still sort of get away with writing it sequentially. So they were not necessarily adhering to the OOP standards, which is why I enjoyed Java so much, because it forced the issue, which I think is taken for granted these days when people code in Python and Python 3 and things like that. I mean, you're using objects. Yeah. And at the time, those were pretty much new ideas. There may have been some obscure language. Well, I say obscure, but like Ada was not in my wheelhouse. Okay. I wasn't in the government sector or anything like that. So, but yeah, these days it's like, oh yeah, of course it works that way. Well, it had to start somewhere.
I'm curious. I love that you compared coding to art. I'm an artist, and I also got my career started being a software developer. And I've heard developers talk about it being poetry and things like that. So I'm curious if that's a perspective that you went into coding with, or if you came to see it that way.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think I came to see it that way. Especially when I started being able to do designs and then do coding on my designs. And I felt like it was like you would build the mold, or you would kind of build, like if you look at a crayon book, it's like the outline, and then you get to color in all the lines with different crayon colors. So yeah, I absolutely loved it.
So you're doing security now, and you had other roles in the past. Did you switch to security? Did you feel it like a switch, or was it more gradual?
So thank you for asking. It's a story. So I did designs, and I was lead architect for many, many projects as the years went by. I did that for about 20 years. And I would have to manage projects. And if you've ever been there, or if you're there, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of weekends. It's a lot of overtime. It's a lot of stress. And so I would have to manage. Not only would I have to write my designs, I also would have a coding part. And then I'd also have an offshore team that would be doing their coding. I'd have to check their code. I'd have to interface with the business to make sure that we were building what they wanted us to build, which was like, you need an interpreter for that sometimes because, because they understand the business part of it, but that doesn't always necessarily translate to how you would code it. And business analysts, for the most part, are gone. So, which I think is a shame. I think that's a really important role that a lot of companies don't have anymore. Yeah. But culmination of all of that, I worked many, many hours standing up 5 different environments, and I just had enough. A series of events occurred, and I won't get into those, but let's just say I had a moment of clarity, and I had a friend, so sort of in the background, I had a friend that had approached me about cybersecurity. Now you have to realize when you're an architect, when you're a software architect, you have to design security anyway. It's one of the, what do they call it, isms or whatever. It's one of the in the responsibilities, right, in the requirements. So I had been designing modules within the application. I had been doing, IDP related stuff for SSO, for single sign-on stuff. I had been in the realm of security, so it wasn't like a drastic switch.
Okay.
But a friend of mine in the background, in parallel, had said, "Well, why don't we study for this certification called CISSP?"
Oh my gosh!
And you have to once again take yourself back. So take yourself back to 2006. So certifications in cybersecurity were not very, now they're like around every corner. So at the time there were very few limited paths to get into cybersecurity. That was one of them. And the other thing you have to remember is that it was not very palatable. Saying you're a hacker was not cool. Sounded like you were doing something illegal, But I was very intrigued by my friend's proposal, so I had been studying for that on the side. I got that certification. It was very difficult. It's written by lawyers. I don't know how many of you realize, but it's a very difficult exam. So I got that, and I went to my boss after the project was over, and I said, "Well, this is it. This is my last project. I don't want to do this anymore. I just want to do cybersecurity." And it was just, I don't know, I was at the right place at the right time, and a very large incident occurred, and almost overnight, I was elevated from a very obscure, lead architect to in charge of all of the security stuff within my division.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what was it like? Was it what you thought it would be?
It was a lot of responsibility. So it was a very good initial step, and my CISSP actually helped me because I had to work in every domain.
Yeah.
So I was doing budgeting for security. I was looking at products. I was sitting on incident response calls. I was doing compliance. I did the whole gambit. And out of that, I realized I don't want to do all this. So another turn of events, I did that for maybe a couple years. And then another turn of events, I ended up getting a different boss. And he asked me, he says, "What do you want to do?" I said, "Well, I just want to do penetration testing. That's all I want to do. I want to capitalize on the experience I already have in web, API, and mobile. And that's all I want to do." And so that kind of was the beginning. And then I got to build my team.
Can you just maybe walk us through what it actually, when you do a pen test for, like, let's say a mobile, right? Like, what does that look like? We know it's not just running a scan, but what does it actually look like?
So mobile in particular it's a lot of work. Might be easier to describe web first.
Yeah.
Web or API. So with web, you generally need to understand your application stack, meaning, what is the technology being used in the presentation tier?
Yeah.
Okay, it's React.js. Okay, let me make note of that. What's at the business tier? Well, more than likely it's either Node.js, if it's an SPA, if it's a single page application. But, you also have to realize that a lot of big companies, they'll have an amalgamation of many different technologies because, things just sort of get added onto. So you might have Java as your backend. You might have Spring Boot, as the backend, or you could have IIS.NET as your backend. So the first thing really is mapping mapping out the technologies that you're faced with, and then mapping out the business logic of the application and spending time understanding, okay, what does this thing do? Because you need to understand what the application does in order to find some of the finer or harder to find vulnerabilities, such as authorization checks and objects that might have IDOR or insecure direct object references. So that's really what it starts with. Is it doesn't sound exciting, but it really is necessary in order to be very successful. And I think that's the reason why using scanners may not be successful, because they're not going to go to that level of understanding the business logic within an application.
Yeah. And for a mobile application, you're talking about the same sort of steps for at least the business, understanding the business application, right? You're understanding.
Yes. So, yes. And then mobile has other layers to it. So you're going to have reverse engineering. You're going to have to know specifics to iOS and Android. You need to feel very comfortable reading code. You need to feel very comfortable writing a malicious app to basically test weak points in the target application. So all of that developer background and enjoying all that all comes back to you again as a cybersecurity professional. It's just a different focus. Instead of creating, you're looking for a way to tear it down.
Do you get involved with artificial intelligence, or do you have opinions on how AI might change application pen testing?
So I use it almost every day on every pen test. And I'm very specific with it. Sometimes it's helpful, sometimes it's not. If it's something very, I don't want to say generic, but if it's something focused, I guess. So, for example, let's say I have a file upload vulnerability, but I can't get my web shell to execute because the application logic only allows downloads. Okay, well, ChatGPT, tell me what you got. What can I do with this? I can only download. Are there any possible attack vectors? And so it'll spew out some ideas. And, I may still come up empty-handed, but it only costs me a few minutes of time to check.
Yeah. That's what, so you're not using it. I know on the security side, a lot of folks on the defender side, they're using it to automate routine tasks. They're not using it for its creativity. They're using it to kind of follow form. But it sounds like you're using it as like a thought partner.
Absolutely. It's my pen testing buddy. So, because a lot of times, so like on my team, and I'm having the guys on my team feel more and more comfortable with asking the AI to because I want to teach them how to fish, right? They're not always gonna have me around, because eventually I'll probably retire. But I want to make them feel like, okay, even if none of my cohorts know the answer, maybe there's a place I can go where, somebody else can help me.
Can I ask you, going back to from the cutting edge to maybe the older school part of it, what's your opinion on bug bounties? Do you still get involved in them at all? What do you think about those programs?
Oh, I love them.
Okay.
I actively do bug hunting. I don't have a lot of time to put into it, and that is a big part of it, which I don't think people understand. They just hear, oh, you're going to get thousands and thousands of dollars, and just run this little scanner here. Well, my MO, as you've already seen, is that's not my way. Yeah. I'm going to go in, I'm going to look at the OAuth flow. I'm going to look at the handshake. I'm going to look at, hey, is there something here that I can pick at and possibly get the access token to come to me. So it takes a lot of time. But the one thing I really like about bug bounty hunting is that I can be very focused on the attacks that I do. I don't have to do a full pen test. Okay. I don't have to do, 150 different OWASP test cases like I do for a penetration test. So I can basically just pick my favorites, and I have like 3 to 5 favorite attacks, and those are the only ones I do.
Do you ever come across bugs that you can turn in for bounties when you're pen testing?
So for my day job, what I call my day job, no. I also run a side business doing penetration testing, and I don't want to go against my client, or my client's client. But I do want to say, if I were to find something flawed in the third-party application that they're using, like recently this happened, and I saw that third-party product did have a vulnerability disclosure program, I would ask them, do you mind if I submit this? Because this is a flaw in their framework. It's not something you wrote. Mm-hmm. But I would always go the transparent route. I wouldn't do it on the sly. It's just not my nature.
Yeah.
What's your kind of observation of a company that does put out a vulnerability disclosure program or a bug bounty program? Like, what's the hit rate? I mean, is it 100% stuff gets found? What do you think the hit rate is, the average company that launches a program like that?
So there's a whole, that's kind of a loaded question, Jack.
All right.
Because there's a whole different mindset on vulnerability disclosure programs versus bug bounty programs. I know they might seem like the same thing. For purposes of answering your question, I'll just talk as if they're the same thing.
Okay.
So one of the things that's tricky with bug bounty hunting is the triaging, because I have found what I thought were fantastic bugs. I made movies of them. I put screenshots together. I explained, like, I have a doctorate, right? So I like to write. And so, I write all this and explain step by step. And then they just come back and say, no, not applicable. It's like, I can steal your cookies, right? So
that's awesome.
So it's one of those things where I don't rely on it for income. Okay. It's really just a personal challenge. It's something that I think is fun, a way to grow, because the more you can expose yourself to different targets, different technologies, different scenarios, the better you're going to get. Yeah. So that's why I do it.
Can I ask the ignorant question that I did not know the answer to? What is the distinction between a bug bounty program and a vulnerability disclosure program?
So a vulnerability disclosure program, and I'm certainly not the expert here, but there are some hackers out there that won't touch them. Okay. Because they are like, and they'll tell you on their page, well, we're not going to give you any points. We're not going to give you any rep. We're not going to give you any money. Like they'll be very specific.
Yeah.
Whereas a bug bounty, like a true bug bounty program, all those things are in play. Yeah. But I found an account takeover on a VDP, and I submitted it, and they did accept it. But they told me it was a duplicate. So I did get the reputation, and it was a crit. I mean, I got credit, but I obviously didn't make the $10,000. So or whatever it is.
If it was a duplicate, they should have taken down the evidence then. They should have fixed
Right.
it, right? And you should have been able to caught it.
So that is yet another aspect to this.
Right. We knew about it. We just didn't stop it.
I will never shop there, but yeah.
Understood.
Yeah. So,
Understood.
but eventually they did come around to fixing it. It was about a year later, and they sent me an update that they fixed it. But that's the thing is VDPs are, some people like them, some people don't. It's really depends on what you're trying to achieve. And for me, I was just trying to crack the door open. I wanted to kind of get some points on the board for my reputation. And that ended up opening a lot of private programs. And that's really where you want to be. Because once you get invites to the private, obviously it's going to be a smaller pool of attackers.
That's good.
So switching gears just a little bit, can you tell us about Sunshine Solutions and how it came to be?
Sure. So Sunshine Solutions is my side business. I started it in 2012, and I have just a handful of clients. So most of them are local in the area. I have a few clients that are in the DC area. But basically, I'm a staff augmentation. So if they need someone to come in who's like, this sounds whatever, I don't want to say, but like big guns, they have like a big client, and they want to make sure that all the rocks are turned over, then they'll have me come in. Sometimes I'm asked for specifically, like if I've done work for that client's client before. It's nice. It's nice extra money. But the best part is the exposure to all the different targets, like I mentioned before, which is really the reason why I started it. And because when I started working on my doctorate degree, my day job would not pay for that. So I had to work side gigs in order to pay for that. Mm-hmm. And doctorate degrees are not cheap. So.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned that because you're a doctor, you love to write. So can you tell us a little bit about one of your books, the Burp Suite Cookbook, and what inspired you to create that? Sure.
Yeah, so make sure you get the second edition. Mm-hmm. So that one just came out last year. So I was approached by Packet, which was the publisher for that one, because I had written 3 courses on Pluralsight on Burp Suite. Mm-hmm. And before that, I had done an online course for a different online training website. So it's all sort of just culminated, I guess. But the second edition of the book it's got a lot of changes, a lot of the settings that I recommend, because Burp has changed a lot, as you can imagine. And I feel like people, when they look at it, they don't really know where to start. Like, well, what do I turn on, or what do I turn off? And so the book is a way to sort of help them with that, as well as how to do a lot of different OWASP tests using Burp.
Speaking of helping, our producer met you at multiple events where you were working directly with high school students. So where did that passion come from for working with tomorrow's cybersecurity professionals?
Well, so I wanted to make sure that if there's anything I can share to help or encourage people, young people, I want to do that. I know that people were an inspiration to me. I wasn't lucky enough to meet some of them, but I would see them online and things like that. And so, yeah, and you never know when you plant a seed. You have no idea what might come of it later. Maybe you never get to see that person again. But there was a young man. He retired from the military, and he's getting retooled. And he wanted to, learn cybersecurity. He didn't know what he wanted to do. I gave him one of my books and just signed it. And I tell you, this is such a cool story. So I had not seen him in probably a couple of years, and he became very successful as a data scientist, which I'm just like so impressed with that. But funny story, day before the hurricane, I go to the Home Depot to get a portable air conditioner, right? It's like the last one there. These things, they weigh like 75 pounds. So I can't pick up 75 pounds. So I'm standing there outside the door and thinking, how am I going to get this in my car? Because everybody was busy, as you can imagine. Yeah. And all of a sudden, here comes Julio, and he's like, hey, Dr. Sunny. He's like, do you need some help? Wow. Yes, I do.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it's cool.
How do you feel about the next generation? How are the kids doing? Are they all right?
I think the kids are all right. I think I'm really, really impressed with how smart they are. I did almost every year we do with the guild, with the cybersecurity guild, we do something at USF with high school kids, and then the thing at I guess I did 2 different activities this year. They're just so impressive. And I mentioned something about how to do a certain exploit, just sort of mentioned it. And this young man comes up to me after my talk and he's like, can you tell me more about how you do that? And I'm like, oh, yeah, you did it. And I was so impressed with that because, like, he was listening. He was, like, really listening to every word that I was saying. So yeah, I'm very impressed. I think we'll be in good hands. They just need a little more experience. That's all.
That's good to hear.
Dr. Sunny, we're about to take a short break, but I do want to ask, some folks will watch clips of this. Occasionally we'll put together video clips of this podcast, and behind you there's a very cool poster that says Dr. Wares. Can you explain what the poster is behind you?
Yeah, so this was designed by my friend Chris. It has like all my books falling over it. I think it's supposed to be Doctor Who.
Oh, yes, that's what I was hoping. Okay.
Yeah. And
right, because it has, okay.
Yeah, and he made this for me. I had a big graduation party when I got my doctorate degree, so very cool. He made that.
That's awesome. And that's like another connection between the creativity of the arts and the creativity of both application development and application security. So very cool to see. All right, well, we're going to take a short break now, and when we return, we'll put Dr. Sunny through our lifestyle polygraph. Stay with us.
You're listening to the No Password Required podcast. We cover cybersecurity and a lot of other stuff.
Welcome back.
Thank you.
As many of you know, the Lifestyle Polygraph is a test used by the federal government to determine if a person is worthy of learning some of our nation's most important secrets. Here, we use this technique for slightly lower stakes, to determine whether our guest can join our fantasy cybersecurity squad. Dr. Sunny, are you ready for the Lifestyle Polygraph?
Sure, let's do it.
All right, first question. How would you describe your perfect workday?
Perfect workday is learning something new. So going through some bug bounty report or learning a new hacking technique, that is a perfect day.
Dr. Sun, do you have to run pen testing at odd hours? Like, are you trying to test on the other side, whether they're asleep or awake? Like, as a result, in your role, do you need to like be up all night sometimes?
I only have to be up all night if the client has that as part of the engagement. Okay. But most of the time, no, because remember, I do gray box testing, so I'm given accounts. So I don't have to like hack in. It's not a black box for me.
Got it. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, what is the most underrated place you've ever traveled?
Oh, thank you for asking. Rex and I talked about this. So I recently came back from the Canadian Maritimes. So if you're not familiar, there are 3 provinces that make up the Canadian Maritimes: Nova Scotia, which is where Halifax is, which is where you'd fly in; right. Prince Edward Island, which is based on the Anne of Green Gables books, if you've ever heard of those, and Nova Scotia. And it's just absolutely gorgeous up there. They have drives kind of like PCH that we have in America. But, obviously it's the East Coast. Of course, you'd have to go in the summer and early fall before it gets too chilly. But it's beautiful. On Prince Edward Island, every morning I woke up and I ran on the beach. And
oh, wow.
It was just a gorgeous place. So highly recommend.
Oh, that's great. Because there is a lot. I mean, it seems like on a map it would be beautiful, but it just, at least from Florida, not a lot of people travel there. So right. I like the idea of getting out there.
Yeah, do something different. I mean, we live in the tropics, so do something different.
It's true. It's true. We're already living in a retirement community. It's good to go to other communities. That's what's so nice about it. So I kind of feel like sometimes in Florida. Well, that's wonderful.
Number 3, which Star Wars character do you most identify with?
Boba Fett. So Boba Fett
that makes sense.
Yeah, the bounty hunter, right?
Yeah.
And what was funny is that, I mean, I saw Star Wars. I can't believe I'm saying this. I saw Star Wars when it came out. So my mother took me. And it was amazing. It was just like nobody had ever made a movie like that. The dog fights in space. And it was just like, for a young person, it was just everything. So, but Boba Fett, I just always thought he was so cool. He was so mysterious with that mask and everything. And he had the jetpack and, he's cool. But I obviously had no idea that the character would actually have like a cult following. Yeah. And then, of course, it's, become now Mandalorian and all the clan and all that. So pretty cool.
It was like there was generations of children before 1977 who didn't know what bounty hunters were. And it was something like every person born after 77 now knows what, or whatever, I think it's 77, 70, knows what a bounty hunter is because of Boba Fett. Like it's like a legitimate thing that kids want to be when they grow up. They want to be bounty hunters, just like, like Boba Fett. Right?
Yeah.
Like, oh, that's
so cool. And what of course, Jabba the Hutt being the OG, so.
Right. Right.
Does hearing more of the backstory make you like the character more, or are you like enough already with the clones and the various stuff?
It's bothersome. Attack of the Clones was bothersome, although I do like the actor. I met him, actually. So there used to be, so at Disney, there used to be these Star Wars weekends. They don't do them anymore.
Okay.
But he was there. His last name, I think his name is Tamura. Very nice man. So I don't really like that they changed, his voice and all the, that like, don't touch it. If it happened a certain way, just leave it.
Yeah. In Appalachia, we would say, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
That's right. That's exactly right. But, I get it. They have to be consistent. So,
yeah. All right. 4th question. What cooking show would you most want to be featured on? And would you want to compete or judge?
Well, Top Chef, I think, is probably the best. Although there's good, Beat Bobby Flay's. There's some great shows out there, but Top Chef is probably the most renowned. Would I want to compete or eat? Probably eat.
Yeah.
watching some of those chefs like Richard Blaze, and he was so good, right? He was on, I don't know, 4 or 5 seasons. He owns the Blaze Pizza. I don't know if you guys ever heard of that. Anyway, phenomenal chef. Oh, wow. But yeah, he would like walk into a room like, I smell bacon. Do you smell bacon? Maybe the next contest is with bacon, you know?
That's incredible.
That's awesome.
So that having that mindset, it would be different, but yeah, that would be fun.
Dr. Sunny, are you a cook? Do you like to cook?
I like to cook. Okay. I'm a foodie. I like to cook, but my husband is actually a better cook.
Okay.
So, I mean, we go back and forth, but I would rather be his sous chef and, chop up everything, get his mise en place ready. That's fine because he's the one that has to like make sure everything is warm at the same time.
Yeah, that is definitely a science and an art.
But yeah, we have a good time with the cooking.
Oh boy, that's why I cook and I don't bake, because the cooking there's a little more room for error, and the baking is precision, and it's got to be just right. And I don't have the mind for that, or certainly after a long day of doing what it is that we do. Right? I like the idea of having a little more forgiveness at the edges.
Understandable. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Final question. Can you tell us about your pet and maybe even introduce us to him?
Oh, sure. So my pet is Micah, and he is a white-bellied Kaik, and he's very loving, but he's very much an attention-grabbing parrot. Sometimes he's like having a toddler.
Oh my gosh.
So, like today, I wasn't paying enough attention to him, so he started chewing on my couch, and of course, I said, "No chew, no chew." Okay. And but he wants me to actually go over there and pick him up and pet him and play with him. So, I can show you some pictures, or I could go get him, but he's in his cage right now.
No, it's fine. Totally fine. How long have you had that pet?
So I've had him now for 3 years. He was my mother's parrot, and she passed away. So, and he is now 28.
Oh wow! Oh wow!
Yeah,
they live quite a long time too, don't they?
Yeah, and it was very difficult rehoming him. He was very upset that my mother was gone. So we both kind of had to adjust. But I feel like he calls me mommy all the time. So I feel like he's bonded to me.
It's a parrot that can talk. He can talk. He can talk.
He can talk, but Kayaks are not known for their talking ability.
Okay.
He sounds like Minnie Mouse when he talks. So.
What a beautiful thing.
All right. So, Jack, what do you think? Does Dr. Sunny get to join our fantasy cybersecurity squad?
I do. From my perspective, Dr. Sunny was in at question number 3 with Boba Fett, which is there's a handful of correct answers, but that tops the correct answers list to that question. So well done, Dr. Sunny. Dr. Sunny, thank you so much for joining us. If our listeners want to connect with you in a professional capacity, how can they do that?
They can DM me on Twitter or X through @Sunnyware. Also, they can reach out to me on LinkedIn.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
That brings us to the end of the show. But first, Kayley, what did you learn today?
You know, coders often get a bad rap for not being very creative. There's all kinds of memes about that, about the communication between designers and developers. But in fact, it is its own art form, and it requires its own sort of creativity and just outright art. So I loved that she brought that up.
Yeah. And if we're only learning to do something based on a set of what do you want to call them, like check the box steps, right? You're missing a whole lot of other opportunities, and she articulated that for us today for sure. I tell you, one thing I learned, and I confessed that I didn't know before, was that there is this distinction between a bug bounty program and a voluntary, essentially a voluntary disclosure reporting program. Yeah. And that the bug bounty program is the one that has the proper terms and conditions and real criteria for participation and the potential for cred and for potentially getting paid. Yeah. So that was kind of cool to know that, because I've worked with a number of clients on bug bounty programs and setting them up. So I don't see the other side of things. I don't get to see the things that don't come outside to the outside lawyers. So that was a cool thing to learn the difference between. All right. Well, for the entire No Password Required team, I'm Jack Clabby. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk again soon.
Thank you for listening to the No Password Required podcast. You can find us on social media at No Password Pod. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the No Password Required podcast. And if you know someone who might like it, please share it with them. The show is produced by Cyber Florida. And a special thank you goes out to our friends at Carlton Fields. If you'd like to learn more, visit our website, cyberflorida.org/pod. All opinions expressed by the No Password Required podcast participants are their own and do not exclusively represent the views and opinions of Cyber Florida.